Hi, my name is Justin, or This Just In. I'm here to bring you my first book review video, and I'm excited to bring this to you. I am excited to have I'm very happy. I want to thank everybody, all the people who subscribed to my channel from my first video. I really appreciate it. I understand that I might be riding in the coattails of my friend Michael K. Vaughn a bit, as he did give me a shout out and linked my channel. Thank you, Michael Vaughn. I appreciate the subscribers that came my way. I really hope that I can bring you guys something that you enjoy watching. And speaking of which, here we are, my first book review video. As I stated in my previous video, I am going to be going through the Read Every Book by Challenge with my friend Michael. He is bravely committed to read every Stephen King book that has ever been written. And the first book, of course, as we all know, is Carrie. And I'll be going through this challenge with him. I started with Carrie, as he did. And they're not just wanted to help him out, but also, I read a lot of Stephen King when I was in high school, middle school and high school. Read quite a bit of Stephen King. In fact, I would say that I probably read every book of his up until about Needful Things. I think I dropped away there. I picked up again, I think, was it Regulators and Desperation? I read those two. And I might have read one or two others, and I think the last actual Stephen King book I read was 11/22/63, which I thought was great, but I am a bit of a sucker for time travel stories, and that was really why I picked that up. But that's the last thing of his I read, and nothing else since then. Don't recall, what was that, in the mid-2000s? I don't feel great to say it. I don't have a lot of hopes for his works after that point, but I hope to be pleasantly surprised. But as I said, so nostalgia plays a big part in my wanting to go through this. So what I've done is I've gone and I went online and bought some of the older mass market paperback versions of his books that I remember holding and reading when I first started reading Stephen King books. So for instance, here's the version of Salem's Lot that I'll be reading. Well, I think I'll be reading it. This sadly happened to the book. It didn't come like this, but it happened afterwards. I haven't been reading very much of it yet, but this happened. It's kind of a bummer, but I'll probably forge ahead. What I'll probably do is what I did when I was in high school. I'll probably tape it up, because when I was in high school, I would carry these around with my my textbooks and my notebook, and I would carry them like this with my whatever paperback I was reading at the time sitting on top. I would put my hand on it, carry it around, and then the book would slowly wear away here. Eventually it would fray, and you'd see this gap in there, and then the cover would eventually have all these problems. I would tape it up. So this is more more of my high school nostalgia. This fits right in, actually. So I may tape it up, or maybe I'll just buy another more up-to-date version of it, but that will kind of take away from the nostalgia. This book also has kind of a smell, but oh well. Anyway, maybe we can talk more about that when it's time for Salem's Lot review, but I'll try to quickly go through these other ones. I picked up The Shining. This is the version that I remember reading. I'll be reading this copy. Also got a couple more that I have yet to really to open up. Well, okay, open up this one because it was so taped up. I wanted to do a little bit of an unboxing, but this is so taped up I don't want to spend 2 minutes cutting it open. But here is the copy of The Dead Zone that I'll be reading. And again, I think this is the copy that I read. I don't recall if it was the like a movie time version that I read, but this is the version that I read. Of course, this is so. And then here's another set of Stephen King books. Let's go ahead and open this up and see what's in here. Again, I got started on it because it was taped up so much, and I decided to just at least get a head start here. And we'll see what we got in here. Let's hope that it is what is in here is what I was actually buying. Here we go. We've got Eyes of the Dragon. This is the version I remember reading. And then we've got Dance Macabre. This is the version I remember reading. It's a little dusty. And then Cujo, which may be the first Stephen King book I read. And I might have been, I'll have to look at when it was published, but I might have been like 12 when I read this. It's kind of a weird age to read that book. But there they are. And hopefully, I have a good time with these, and I will get that nostalgic feeling that I'm kind of going for. Hopefully I'll enjoy them as much as I remember enjoying them in high school. But so that's where I am with that. I'll be picking up more copies of these and hopefully slow down a little bit. Hi, you might notice it looks a little different. Filming got interrupted, so I had to start things a little bit later, but here we are back. Thanks for sticking around. Now I'm ready to dive into the review, my discussion of Carrie proper. So Carrie, of course, was written by Stephen King in 1974. I think we all know pretty well the story behind it. It's his first published book, though his fourth written book, the other three books being the Bachman books that were later released. And it was famously thrown into the trash by King when he doubted that he could write a book from the perspective from a female perspective. But his wife found it in the trash, read it, and decided he really had something there. So she rescued it, encouraged him to continue writing the book, and it became he sold it for $400,000, and it changed his life and it changed ours because, well, here I am going through a read every book by Stephen King challenge. And so Carrie is, again, we all know the story pretty well if we've seen the movie. A lot of us have probably read the book, but I'll try to go through a quick synopsis. Carrie White, 16-year-old high school student. She is the target of much bullying at her school in the town of Chamberlain, Maine. One day she is in the shower at the gym in high school, and she gets her first period. And she freaks out. She thinks she's bleeding to death. She doesn't know what's happening to her because her religious fundamentalist mother has kept this information from her. Any information about sex or changes to her body as she grows have been kept from her. So she has no idea what's happening. The girls there, they catch on to what's happening, and they taunt and torment her. Carrie ends up going home to her mother, who would be somebody you would hope would be a source of comfort for her, but is not. Instead, she physically abuses Carrie and puts her in a closet. Though meanwhile, Carrie has started to realize that she has these telekinetic powers, and she starts to practice them and develop them. And meanwhile, Sue Snell is one of the girls that was there during the event at the gym. She took part in the taunting, the tormenting, and she feels guilty about that. And I thought it was interesting that she feels guilty about it in a way that seemed a little more, seemed to make it a little bit more about herself than actually having as much sympathy for Carrie than I thought might be normal, which I thought was kind of an interesting take. She also has these observations on being a teenager that I thought were very mature for a teenager, and maybe unrealistically so, but I thought were still very insightful. Was interesting, an interesting aspect to that character. And her boyfriend Tommy has had the same kind of thoughts and insights into being a teenager same kind of thoughts that she did. She does talk to her boyfriend and have her boyfriend ask Carrie out to the upcoming prom, and the girls that took part in this event, they are forced to go through a detention. If they don't go through detention, they have the option to do the detention or to miss the prom. Chris Hargensen, one of the girls who also took part in the taunting and tormenting of Carrie White, she resents Carrie for this, and so she decides to takes out revenge on Carrie. She enlists her boyfriend Billy Nolan to acquire pig's blood, and she rigs the election, the prom king and queen election, such that it gives her the chance to dump the pig's blood on top of Carrie and Tommy. And unfortunately, this sets off Carrie's telekinetic rampage, and she destroys the school. She destroys the entire town of Chamberlain, and ends up killing her mother. Sorry about the spoilers there if you haven't seen Carrie, but I figure at this point a lot of us probably know the story. But the book, I really enjoyed the book. I enjoyed it a lot more than I recall from the first time that I read it as a teenager decades ago. And a couple of interesting things about it. The epistolary format, which a lot of reviewers that I watched or I read complained about it a little bit, but there's a combination of narrative and epistolary format, which are excerpts from books or interviews or a Sue Snell memoir, and some of the Carrie White committee hearings. And they serve a couple of interesting purposes. One is kind of obvious. It builds tension through some foreshadowing of events that are to come. And also, it not only builds the tension with the foreshadowing, but it but it gives you this idea that not only the event with Carrie and the destruction of the town is not just this happens, Carrie destroys the town, the end, but it's a watershed moment in society because we start to learn that some girls have this telekinetic power. It's a gene that's dormant, that's recessive in men, but it is dominant, and it can be dominant in women. And so the society is becoming aware of this, and if not accepting it, at least becoming aware that this is more of a possibility. And I think this ties into one of the major themes in Carrie that is not addressed a lot in the reviews or the videos that I read about, or videos that I watched about the book, and that's the theme of feminism. In some of my research after reading the book, I came across this article from Ms. Magazine, and it quotes Stephen King, his comment on Carrie, one of his comments on Carrie in his book, Danse Macabre. And I think it's I want to read it to you. Carrie is largely about how women find their own channels of power, but also what women fear about women and women's sexuality. Writing the book in 1973 and only 3 years out of college, I was fully aware of what women's liberation implied for me and others of my sex. Carrie is woman feeling her powers for the first time and, like Samson, pulling down the temple on everyone in sight at the end of the book. So it seems to me that telekinesis is being used as a symbol of the second wave of feminism that started in the 60s and grew into the 70s. And a large part of that movement had to do with sexual freedom and reproductive rights for women. So I think that ties nicely into Carrie's realizing her telekinetic powers as she's moving forward into puberty. And also the Ms. Magazine article I mentioned, it references also kind of the conflict between religious fundamentalism and feminism, and that also, of course, ties into Carrie's mother and how she treats Carrie. So I think that's an interesting read on the book, and it's interesting to read Carrie with that in mind. It is unfortunate that Carrie dies at the end, but it would seem that not all hope is lost with Carrie, as we learn through the excerpts and through a bit at the end of the book, that there are more women out there with telekinetic powers that are coming forward, that are being realized. And we just hope that they don't all have the same kind of mother that Carrie had. So yeah, like I said, I enjoyed this quite a bit. I was very moved by the book. I was moved by the what happens to Carrie and the character of Carrie and what she goes through all the way till the end. So I would, yeah, it's a great book, and has some deeper themes than I remember it having when I first read it. So yeah, I really glad that I read Carrie again at the start here of my Read Every Book by Stephen King challenge. A couple of other things I wanted to point out, a couple of Stephen King tropes. We have the parenthetical remarks, the interjections into the narrative flow that represent maybe a character's inner monologue or an inner conflict and their thoughts, their conflicting thoughts that they might carry in their head. And that is used heavily throughout the book, very frequently, more than any other Stephen King book that I think I can recall. But it has kind of a unique little twist or unique purpose at the very end of the book that I thought was pretty interesting. That I won't spoil that, at least. So if you haven't read the book, that might be something that might be left as a little surprise for you. And also, like the bully, Billy Nolan, seems to be the same kind of irredeemable, just purely evil bully. The same kind that we see, I think, in It and The Body. These kinds of bullies that they're just pretty much this pure evil. Even I think Billy more than Chris. Chris is of course a bully and evil, but I think even she is not quite the same. And she, as I recall, she has a moment where she wants to pull back. She wants to stop, or might want to stop, and has doubts about actually carrying through with dumping the pig's blood on Carrie. But Billy really pushes her forward, as I seem to recall in the book. So those are a couple of interesting Stephen King tropes that we find in the book. So there you have your review of Carrie. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching. As far as future videos for me, for this just in, I haven't really, to be frank, I haven't really thought that far beyond my first review of Carrie. Of course, I'll have a review of Salem's Lot when it comes time for that. I just barely started it, but I wanted to get through my review of Carrie before I kind of launched into reading another Stephen King book. There might be some other subjects. I think I mentioned time travel before. If I haven't, well, the time travel is one of my favorite types of stories to read. I love time travel stories, so I might read and talk about a couple of different time travel books. And there might be some other things there. There's some classics in literature, there's some gaps I want to fill in there that might be fun to read and go through. I have ordered a copy of the Silmarillion recently that I'd like to read that. I'm reading Lord of the Rings to my youngest child, my youngest son, and we're enjoying that a great deal. We're going slowly through Lord of the Rings, and I think it might be a good time for me to read the Silmarillion. I don't think that I'll be reading that to him yet, though. I'll consider it, but probably not. He's probably not ready. So thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it, and I hope to see you again. Thank you. Bye.